I'm Sandra, and Dad is right behind the camera right now. Natasha is way up there where safety is. And right now we are standing in the middle of Lock 17 of the second Welland Canal. Welcome to part 2 of our exploration of the old Welland Canals.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Okay, we are at Lock 13, or what is left of Lock 13. Now, we're only about maybe a third of the way up the lock where Sandra is standing. And if I point down, you can see there's a bunch of water basically coming out of the lock wall. Sandra says there's 2 pipes there. And of course we have all this debris plugging up the end of the canal. And we just drove over that area. So at this point, Lock 13 is basically just getting buried underground. And the water that's feeding this creek is coming from some pipes. Here we can see, here's our lower gates, the space for those. Natasha's back on the road we just were, and these are the culverts that Sandra was describing. And you can see they're just basically coming right out of the side of the wall of the canal. Of course, everything around them is all poured concrete. So the whole side of the canal has been removed, all the stonework, and then this has been built into it. And of course we see the water heading downstream to the other locks that we encountered. And as always, we can see the recess in the wall where the gates were, and then we can see the curved wall of the entry to the lock. It's hard to picture that there were once sailing ships being pulled up here by teams of horses or donkeys on their way to Lake Erie. And pretty much the top 2/3 of this lock have just been filled in with debris. So here we are, 3 Loblaws employees on vacation filming a Sobeys. And the reason for that is, according to the historical records we've found, Lock 14 basically runs along the side of the building here. It's completely buried, but it is possible that Sobeys couldn't build any farther in this direction because the lock is underneath. But running that way, and mysteriously, the parking lot doesn't extend over that area. That's where the canal is supposed to run, basically up towards that hill there.
So right now we are by Lock 14 by the Sobeys that is currently underground, and they have a plaque here, and they also have right over there, we'll insert a picture in a moment, of this leveraging bar which was used when they were harvesting the limestone from the quarry.
And here is Lock 15. We're on the upstream side of it. And we're just right across the street from residential houses, commercial district, and just down that road on the other side of the bushes there is the plaza with the Sobeys. But Sandra and Natasha went to the other side of these bushes to see if the rest of it is there. Now, of course, you've heard us talk about the vertical slot. That's this right here. And the idea of this is if the lock needed maintenance, they could drop a bunch of square timbers into these all the way to the bottom of the lock, and that would dam off the water. So if necessary, they could work on the gates, which fit into these recesses that we keep talking about. And of course, here is the upstream end of the gate and the characteristic semicircle of the hinge point. Now we're just a little ways up from where I was filming. Natasha's going to tell us about this feature that we've discovered, well, they've discovered.
So me and Sandra were scouting about over here. That's where the main lock is, the main part. And we discovered this pipe over here, and we assume that's gas, and it goes into the ground on either side. Then there appears to be what looks like a sidewalk, but obviously old. So, and then there's this part which looks like a narrow road. So we determined that it was probably a road that was a bridge after the second canal was discommissioned. And instead of that main road over there, it would have been this road going over the canal.
The bridge crossed the canal right about here. Of course, now it's not a bridge anymore, it's just all been filled in underneath. Our theory of the pipe is if you were the utility, are you going to bash your way through all that rock, or are you just going to simply bring your pipe up, bring it over, and back down again? And we figure it's a gas pipe because it's not insulated. Oh, the things that YouTubers will film. Lock 15 is back up that way, and it's all filled in. And back at Lock 13, which was way down there, we saw that the water was coming out of a concrete culvert. And we've noticed these concrete slabs. Don't know if you can hear it over the traffic or the airplane. Why is there always an airplane when I'm trying to film? You can hear water rushing underneath here. This is obviously a cap to the culvert, which is carrying storm water down back to the canal. Okay, we're just off Bradley Street. You can see there's civilization over there. And I'm standing on a lock wall. And this is one of our indentations for the gates. See, that's the downstream end. And that away, 90 degrees over that way, is lock 15. So there does seem to be a sewer pipe structure a little ways downstream of this. It doesn't look like there's any open water here, but that doesn't mean that they're not running the storm sewer through here. Now, it's tough to say with all the foliage, but hopefully you can see that behind the trees there is a bunch of rock work. It's there, trust me. That is the opposite wall of the lock over there. We're still at lock 16, but you can see the top of the far wall very clearly here. And once again, no open water on the bottom of these ones. It doesn't mean that there's not a storm sewer running underneath here. Okay, Sandra walked a little farther upstream and found the upper end of the lock. There's the curved approach wall, and the other one is somewhere in that bank. There's some pieces of cut stone here in front of us, but if we sight along, I don't know how well the zoom will look here, you can see that we're sighting along that back wall. Stop shaking the camera. There we go. And we're on a little path here. Over here, we've got a swamp. So, I don't know if somewhere underneath us there is an inlet to the storm sewer or what. But we're just going to see what happens when we get up to Lock 17, whether we can see anything of that. And what did they call this section?
Oh, Neptune Staircase.
Neptune Staircase. That was 16 to 21?
21, yeah. Right now we are on Neptune Staircase, Lock 17, and it has the curving doors. The curving wall is not here anymore, but we can see like the whole
cross section
of the lock wall. You can see how all the stones are placed, and they're even scattered around the forest here.
And we can see right here how straight the inside lock wall is. And then as I got towards the outside, which was usually buried, not so much. Let's just go around this side here. You can see it coming out of the hillside here. The sad thing is you can tell that you can easily get in here because it's graffiti all over the stonework. And if you've watched part 1 and seen some of the other locks that we've filmed for the second canal, you'll know that in fact this should be way, way deeper. And we're standing on dirt on earth, and back that way behind that slope, don't know if the camera's picking it up, but there's quite a bit of water flowing in there, and that's basically going from the creek, and it's going into the storm sewers under St. Catharines, and it will reappear again just after Lock 14. It'll actually get, all this water will be dumped into Lock 13, which is some ways back, seeing as we're at 17. And just up the hill there, that barely moving human being, that's Natasha. We're gonna go up there and we're gonna see what we can of the water going in. There's a lot of foliage up there, so I don't know what we're gonna see. Okay, we're on the upper end of Lock 17 now. You can see the curved wall going into the upper end of the lock, and you can hear all the water rushing in. And if I zoom in, you can see once again there's the weir that they've installed at the top of every one of these locks, but farther in the water disappears into basically a culvert.
Just stepped over a fence to get a closer view of the water flowing in Lock 17 underground. And there's the weir.
One more little bit of Lock 17. You can see there's the far wall. Here's the other wall, and that right there is where Sandra and I went down the hill to explore. And of course the water is going into the sewer on this side. Okay, we're a little closer to Lock 18. You can see the far wall, and here is the near wall with the characteristic curving in. And a little farther in you can see the indentation for the lock gate. Okay, we're peering over a chain link fence. And this is the inlet to the high side of the lock. And we can hear rushing water, so we know they've built another weir at the upper end of the lock. This one seems to be in pretty good shape. It's certainly intact one end to the other. Okay, here we're peeking through the fence at the lower entrance to lock 19. They've got this one well fenced off, but at least it's easy to walk beside it. We're just looking at the curved entrance walls. We're about 2/3 of the way up lock 19. You can hear the water coming over the weir at the high end, which of course, as we keep on reminding people, was added after the locks were decommissioned. Looks like this is the best shot we're going to get of the upper end. We can just barely see the weir up here. And the characteristics of them all, we've got the indentation in the wall for the lock gates. Alright, here's the upper weir of lock 19. We're just peeking over the fence. Okay, we're at lock 20 and we're standing on a pedestrian bridge. We're looking downstream. You can see where the lock gates fit into the wall. And now we're looking upstream. And what's remarkable here is the door sills. That's the bead part. That's what the gates would come to rest against when they were in place. They're still in place in this lock. And then you can see the weir in behind it that was added after the lock was decommissioned. But the nice thing here is we can still see the sill plates in a V. I think this is the best example we've seen so far of them still being in place. Okay, we're at lock 21, which is the top of what was known as Neptune Staircase. These locks were all pretty close together. We're at the lower end of the lock. Okay, we're about 2/3 of the way up lock 21. If I lean over, we can just about see the water coming off the weir. And it looks like the bead sill is still in place on this one as well. And Sandra pointed out the chimney or smokestack way over there. That looks pretty old. Whether it dates to the same as the rest of the canal, I don't know. But that's all private property over there. We're in Thorold, and this little street here has been blocked off at some point. And underneath us, way down there, don't know how well it's going to show on the camera, is the water course that we've been following that the first and second canal was built out of. But the culvert that it comes out of is just down there somewhere. And yeah, we're not going down there to find it. That doesn't look enjoyable. But trust me, the water is coming out of the ground there. It's not a spring. It's basically a culvert because all this has been built on top of. So this way down there leads towards lock 21 Yes, it was lock 21. We're pretty sure we're not going to find lock 22. This next part may be a bit of a disappointment. Sometime after 1955, most of the canal running through Thorold was filled in. Ahead of us is lock 22, and this photo shows the location of lock 23. And lock 24 runs across the photo here, partway underneath the current fire department. So we're in downtown Thorold, Ontario, and this is the entrance to Beaver Dams Park, and unfortunately they are redeveloping it. I imagine it's probably mostly going to be landscaping. I doubt if they're going to be eliminating the band shell because we can still see it in the distance. Unfortunately, because of the construction and all this fencing, we can't get into the park. But we do have some file footage that we've shot before of the lock, we hope, and we'll insert it now. So here's another shot of lock 25, and you can see the band shell. You can see there's all the characteristics that we've come to expect from lock structures. Our apologies for not being able to wander around inside it. If they weren't rebuilding the park, we could. But that is lock 25 in the heart of Thorold, which is in the middle of the Battle of Beaver Dams Park. Currently being redeveloped, and I highly doubt they're going to be burying the lock. Just across the street from me is where the guard gate used to be. This was not a full lock, it was just a single gate in the canal. Basically, if there was some catastrophic failure downstream or upstream, they could isolate parts of the canal from each other. The gravel path you see is a railway line that literally was just torn out days ago. Now, when we were looking at the satellite images, right where the guard gate should be, there's a hump right around here. We weren't sure what the hump signified. Now, there is something showing, and what is showing is not stonework, it's concrete. You can see there's a very large concrete lid right here. So this is not a structure that dates back to the canal, but we know that the creek that the canal followed runs in this direction, and it's still active and it's running in a culvert. So I'm assuming that this concrete structure here is possibly a lid or an access or something to that culvert. It certainly is in line. The second canal ran that way, and it ran behind me to the Battle of Beaver Dams Park back there. Again, nothing much to see. We are in the industrial area of Thorold, and right down the middle of this street is the path of the second canal. I know, not much to see, but we're trying to follow it as close as we can to the parts we can get at. Eventually we're going to get to an area where it's just going cross country and we can't really follow it. But at least here we know it ran down approximately where this street goes. This is reused footage from last year's video on the third canal. Back then we thought this marshy area was a weir pond for the third canal. It is in fact the route of the second canal. Back in the 50s this was open water, but since then the water has become stagnant and it has reverted being a marsh. Okay, so this crescent-shaped pond here represents the first and second route of the Welland Canal. Up there towards the end, it's heading back towards Thorold, and to the right is the current fourth canal. So it heads this way and eventually joins on to the fourth canal. Okay, we're just downstream of the Allenborg Bridge on the fourth canal, and this depressed area in front of me here is where Lock 26 was of the second and the first canal. Well, the first canal it was a higher number, but this is the path it took. And then just around at the bridge is where it started taking the more straight path that the third and the fourth canal took.
So we just came off Turner Road and we are in the deep cut now. And all that means is during the first and second canal as they were being built, it was super shallow here. So the workers had to dig very, very deep in order for the ships to be able to have enough depth to get through. And that is why it's called the deep cut.
So we're in Port Robinson, and we're standing on the connecting lock. This lock connected the Welland Canal in that direction with a waterway that connected to the Welland River. And from there, ships could sail directly to the Niagara River just upstream by only a few kilometers of Niagara Falls. And this connection was made before the rest of the Welland Canal, e.g. between Port Robinson and Port Colborne, was completed, because that part of the canal took longer to build. So this lock allowed the higher water that was in the Welland Canal to get down to the lower water of the Welland River downstream. And we can see the regular features over on the other side. You can see the curved pieces of metal that are leading into where the hinge pin would be, and those same pieces of metal are on this side, only a little bit more vegetation encrusted. From here to there is the inset for the lock gate, and you can see the same thing on the other side. And we know that this is the upstream side, the side with greater altitude, because the lock gates are pointed in that direction. Pretty much these lock walls would go basically just to the road over there. All of this area has basically been infilled Now this odd structure on Welland's waterfront, I guess you'd call it, it's right downtown on the original 3rd and 4th Welland Canal coming along here. This structure was known as the aqueduct, and basically this is where the Welland River ducked under the 2nd Welland Canal, right here. So there would have been conduits going underneath this structure to carry the Welland River underneath. Currently, that happens over there, and we covered that in our video last year. So the water basically goes through a siphon under the canal and the waters don't mix. So let's go up to the top and we'll look at the upper side. Now the important thing to remember is that this isn't exactly the way it was in service. They've done some little landscaping to it and some additions, that weird little boardwalk coming off. But what we're looking at here is two sides of the canal. The water ran this way, and then underneath it went the Welland River. So as you can see, the water level for the 2nd canal was probably a little bit higher back then. We're near the dog park in Welland, Ontario, and what we're filming here is the junction lock to the feeder canal. And the feeder canal basically was from this wall to that wall, and it went pretty much straight, not quite a straight line, but two straight lines with one bend that took it to Port Maitland. And the main reason for building this canal was to bring feed water to help the Welland Canal work, because originally the Welland Canal did not make it all the way to Port Colborne. This was the high point and they needed water here to make it work. So once they had dug this canal, they realized that they could use it for a limited amount of trade. Once the 2nd canal was built, it wasn't quite as useful and it went into decline, and once the 3rd canal was built, it was pretty much totally bypassed. But you can see the curved walls here. Now what we're looking at here is one of the hinges, or rather the metalwork that supported the hinge. And there's the pocket where the hinge would be, and then the lock gate would be going this way off to the side when it was in the open position. Now up until a few years ago, all of this was buried. When historians decided to expose some of it. The waterway you see over there is the current canal. Now during earlier visits, I wondered about this long, straight bit of water that goes nowhere. Certainly looks artificial. And the reason it looks artificial is it is. This is part of the 1st and 2nd canal. The 1st and 2nd canal crossed over the route of the current canal this way. Then kind of turned a corner and then crossed back over, pretty much joined onto the tall structure that we're looking straight at there. And that's the big grain elevator that sits astride the the third Welland Canal. So basically, this turned the corner and then it went right up in front of that building right there. So what we're looking at here is part of the original route. That is the route of the first and the second canal. Came this way and then bounced back that way over in front of the flour mill. So now we're in downtown Port Colborne in the harbor, and what we're looking at here is this side is Lock 26 of the second canal. On the other side of this abutment here is the last lock of the third canal, and they needed locks at this end just because sometimes Lake Erie would be higher or lower than what the rest of the canal was. It usually wasn't more than a couple feet difference. And the interesting thing is on this abutment here, we can see a circle, and that would have been the bearing plate for one of the early swing bridges which crossed here. The important thing to remember is when these two channels were in use, this big huge main channel in behind that's spanned by that bridge, that never existed. That didn't exist until the early 1930s when the fourth canal was completed.
Thanks a lot for watching our video about exploring the remains of the second Welland Canal.
It's been a really fun past 2 days. We've had a lot of fun exploring. We've learned a lot, and we hope that you have taken away some knowledge as well.